In the village of Zozerno, lost among the marshes of Palesi, they still remember the story of grandfather Panos. He lived on the outskirts, near an old, long-abandoned watermill. That mill had not worked since Polish times, but every night a steady, heavy creaking of wooden gears could be heard from it, as if someone was grinding bones in the dark, not grain. Panos was a miller, not one who grinds flour, but one who serves a being that grinds souls. Such is his ancestral curse. His grandfather, and according to legend, great-grandfather, would start the old mill at night to appease Mylyvon, the one who lives under the wheels. Mylyvono is not the gentle waterman from songs. This is an old, raw creature of mud and dead water, fed not by the energy of the river, but by the time squeezed out of late travelers. His mill repainted the past into oblivion and the future into futility. Panos had seen him only once as a child, when he looked into the hatch under the millstones. There, in the smelly darkness, something large, covered in slime and stardust, was stirring. Instead of a face, there was only an abyss from which a cold, like underground water, snorted. Grandfather Panos died in the winter, and his young son, Andrei, who had returned from the city, laughed at grandfather's tales. He did not refuel the mill that first fatal night. The night was quiet, frosty, but around midnight not a creak was heard from the mill, but something like laughter, low, gurgling like the boiling of a swamp. That same night cats began to disappear in the village, then dogs, and people woke up in the morning with an emptiness in their chests, as if someone had torn a piece of their life from them. They forgot the names of their grandchildren, the way home, the meaning of simple words. Their time was running out. Andrei felt the gaze, heavy, damp, like a pillar of fog. He leaned against the windows, peered into the cracks of the house. One morning, Andrei found footprints in the yard, neither animal nor human. On the wet snow, prints froze, similar to the snags of tree roots, but each of them pulsed with a small, ominous vein. They led to the mill. He could not stand it. Taking his father's lantern and axe, he went to the cursed structure. The river had not yet opened, but the water under the ice was black and seemed to breathe. The door to the mill stood open like a mouth. Inside it smelled of mud and old wood, but the millstones were clean, as if someone had been diligently licking them. The air hummed with silence so thick it weighed on his ears. Andrei went down to the basement where the mechanism had once stood. The stairs creaked beneath him like bones. The basement turned out to be deeper than he had thought. It was no longer just a pit under the mill. It was a tunnel that went downhill into the very depths of the swamps, under the roots of the world. The walls pulsed as if alive, and cold, dark water seeped from them. The air was filled with whispers, thousands of voices, distorted by the millstones, mixed into a single mournful mush of sounds. At the bottom of the tunnel, in a huge cave of gnarled roots, stood it. It was milled. It had no form, but it was everything: walls that breathed, water that dripped, and darkness that bound. In its center, like a pupil, the giant moss-covered millstones of time and tide slowly turned. There was no grain between them. There, in a terrible compression, fragments of memories, faces, voices of all who forgotten and whom they had forgotten. They screamed, but the sound was transformed into a monotonous, ugly crunch. "You didn't start the mill," a voice rang out in Andrei's head. Not a sound, but the very idea of a cold stone at the bottom of a well. "You stole my time. Now I'll take yours, and everyone you know. I'll grind your village into oblivion. No one will remember that it existed. Even the earth will forget your graves." Chibon Maxim, 20.12.2025, 19.58. Andrei looked up and saw his father's face in the mass of the millstone. It slept peacefully, gradually dissolving, splitting into particles of nothingness. Then something broke inside him, not from fear, but from a deep, ancient familiarity. The blood of his ancestors, all the millman, awoke. He did not run away. He approached the pulsating wall, where the roots formed something like a control panel, and placed his palms on it. His grandfather had taught him this as a child, playing, but Andriy did not listen. Now the knowledge flashed like a painful spark. He did not start the mill to pass the time. He started to start it the other way around. Having torn off the main wooden pin that served as a fuse with an axe, he inserted it into the opposite socket and with all his strength pulled the lever that his great-grandmother had once sung about in a lullaby. The mechanism creaked, rumbled, and the millstones began to turn in the other direction. MLYNNIK made a sound that was impossible to imagine. It was the roar of a rotting planet, the cracking of the bones of time. The cave shuddered. The millstones that had been grinding oblivion suddenly began to spit out what had once been inside. Memories, voices, moments, in a chaotic whirlwind they flew into the darkness, hit the walls, and settled back into the clay. The forgotten was returning, and it was madness in its purest form. Andriy does not remember how he got out. He found himself on the shore, dying of the cold, and the mill behind him was burning with a blue, flameless fire. It burned like an old tree, but it did not burn out. The next day, everyone in the village remembered everything, and too much. Old Motrya suddenly spoke in a language she had not heard since childhood, but which the Poles had once spoken. The boy Vasco began to recognize people who had died 100 years before his birth, and on the wall of the former school, inscriptions made with lime during the war appeared, which were erased back in the 60s. The mill still stands there. Sometimes something creaks in it, not because someone is turning the millstone, but because somewhere in the middle of their wooden teeth, something unground, not completely forgotten, always gets stuck. The shadow of MLYNNIK has not disappeared. It simply waits until someone tries to stop his mill again, or until the forgotten memories released that night come together and give birth to something new, something that wants to start grinding again and won't stop.